What else did you pick up from Poliquin, if anything comes to mind? Let's start there, and then I'll trade with you.
So many gems. Oh, that's a tough question.
It is. Sadly, Charles is no longer with us.
I know.
I actually got the phone call about it pretty much immediately after he died, which was very sad, very tragic, way too early. But anything else come to mind?
Okay.
I could buy you some time if you want.
He was trying to master everything from, he was helping bodybuilders, athletes. The thing he told me, so only one time when I finally had the money and freedom to go see, he came to America, did seminar. This was towards the end. Mm-hmm. And he said his only regret was not getting into flexibility sooner. And he was a wealth of strength knowledge, a lot of that strength relating to range of motion. That definitely left an impact on me, that he wished he had gotten into that sooner. And the conclusions that I've come to is you can see my style of training. The way I stretch wouldn't be how someone would normally think of stretching, but just the idea of your strength and your flexibility, really getting those into harmony to where the positions that you're flexible in, you feel strong in those positions.
Yeah.
And so I've really explored that deeply now compared to, let's say, look, people are going to have way more experience in bodybuilding, powerlifting, strong, these kind of things. And Charles had way more experience there than me. So I think that was, if someone goes to my pages and sees the style that I train, I feel like that was the gem that was just what I needed that gave me now like the systems that I love.
And also getting strength and flexibility or mobility and harmony can sometimes mean that you're training both at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Often can mean that.
Yeah.
And we were recording earlier, and not that I'm going to win any gold medals in the split squat, but like my range of motion is pretty good, all things considered. And I credit that to doing the movement. And also I gave him a shout out when we were recording. Jersey Gregoret, some credit where credit is due, who holds multiple world records or did in Masters Olympic weightlifting.
Wow.
He's got to be close to 70, if not 70 now. He can stand on a balance board, like an Indo board, with a fully loaded barbell and do an ass to heels Olympic snatch at his age. It is unbelievable. His wife also holds a few world records. She can do the same thing. Their sustained athleticism is just beyond incredible. And for ankle mobility, he had me doing basically 1 or 2 reps on the minute overhead squats. So I'm holding a barbell overhead, but we're talking bar, maybe plus 5 pounds on either side, very light weights, just doing 1 rep on the minute for like 10 to 20 minutes. That's it. And by greasing the groove in that way, I went from basically 0 ankle mobility, lots of injuries, still a lot of lateral instability, to being able to do what we did earlier, which is frankly, years after I did that training. It's been really durable, which is wild.
Yeah.
So one of the points that I hear you making, that I see reflected in a lot of what you do, is that you don't necessarily have to do, you absolutely don't have to do for most things, like an hour of strength training every other day plus an hour of stretching every day or every other day. You just do not, that is not necessary for most people at all.
Yeah.
Like the surface area for injury goes up also when you're throwing everything in the kitchen sink with lots and lots of hours. And certainly, I mean, I had conversations with Charles back in the day where we would talk about some of these professional athletes, let's just say NFL players, who have 5-6% body fat. You know, they destroyed the combine. They're these absolute phenoms. And I would ask him, what do they eat for their diet? And he'd be like, oh, Wendy's for breakfast, Burger King for lunch, McDonald's for dinner. I mean, you have to be very careful that you're not modeling your training on mutants, right? I'll just pull out a couple of things from Charles. So I first met Charles because he reached out to me after reading The 4-Hour Workweek, my first book. And he had applied a lot of it to his business and his productivity. And I think at the time, he didn't realize this, but I had been exposed to tons of his stuff, just as you had, through magazines.
Nice.
Way back in the day. And he reached out and he's like, you don't know who I am. And I was like, well, actually, that's funny because I do know who you are. And then we connected. And Charles ended up in the 4-Hour Body. He introduced me to myofascial release, an active release technique. And there's some before and after photos with internal rotation on the shoulder in the 4-Hour Body that are unbelievable. They look like they were staged because the gains in range of motion are so significant. He was right about so many things. Wasn't right about everything, but there's so many things that Charles did that ended up being proven out through studies and data collection later in exercise science and in other fields. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, he got a lot of things right.
He was so dedicated. I forget the exact number, but he learned a bunch of different languages just so that he could read essentially everything that had been written about exercise.
In the source language.
Right.
What a maniac. Also, cantankerous as fuck. Oh my God. He was so salty. Part of his charm. One of a kind. Who else has influenced your thinking on exercise and movement, just broadly speaking, your way of training?
Well, Charles, and then also Charles was really cool about crediting where he learned different things. Mm-hmm. And so that's something I've kept in. And it also gave me the idea that okay, there might be real gems in quite a few areas. Mm-hmm. So I know you've talked about gymnastic rings. Okay, doing rows and pull-ups with gymnastics rings. I do 1 set to burnout of each per week. Mm-hmm. That saves me so much time and gives me a pretty balanced upper back for my goals. So there's a gem that Poliquin didn't teach me, but his general mindset of learning.
I'm just going to pause to ask you to repeat something you told me earlier. Where did Charles figure out the backwards sled pulling?
Oh man, such a cool story.
If you want to talk about pulling from unusual places.
Yeah. So Charles, to the source, West Side Barbell in Ohio, led by Louis Simmons, who was creating the strongest powerlifters in the world. And Louis was jealous of these Finland powerlifters of their squats. And they said that their secret weapon was their day job was dragging trees. So Louis invented the idea of dragging weight as a form of exercise. And then that became a way of life at West Side Barbell. One of Louis Simmons' disciples, Dave Tate, who made if you've heard of Elite FTS, they made the Prowler style sled, all kinds of amazing stuff. I'm going to see Dave in 2 weeks actually for the first time. Dave has a quote that's we didn't have warm-ups. It was Louis Simmons just telling him, hey, before you train, go out to the parking lot and drag the sled. Mm-hmm. He's like, we didn't have shit called warm-ups. It was called the stuff you do before you train. And people are like, how long, how many sets and reps? He's like, I don't know. It was X amount of times down the parking lot. Oh, how long was the parking lot? Don't know. So it was cool, the history there. But it's cool how Charles Poliquin would just go to the source. He'd go to the source in Europe or Ohio or wherever it was. He would go to the source. And then it was, like I told you, it was this article of where he used the backward sled for knee rehab for this Olympic athlete that gave me a stepping stone to all this stuff.
Yeah, if people also want to look up Louis Simmons and his writing online, a lot of amazing tidbits to be found to this day and a lot of his writing. And West Side Barbell, for a period of time, it was just one of those factories for mutants. And of course, there's some selection bias. If people are traveling to the Mecca to station themselves there to train, there's a little bit of selection bias. But the results were just so incredible.
Yep.
And the number of world records broken and the number of innovations, whether that's, say, chains to provide more resistance as you get into stronger ranges of motion, with whether it's deadlift or anything else. I mean, bands and so on. I mean, a lot of what you see that is propagated throughout the gym universe started there.
Yep.
Or at least was codified and sort of formalized in some way there.
Yep. So that was a great one. One that I think would be inaccurate if we missed. There was a bodybuilder named Bob Gaida, Gajda. Bob Gaida.
Don't know that name.
He was Mr. Universe right before bodybuilding really blew up. And now these are his words. He worked at the Chicago YMCA. His passion was helping get kids off the streets, off drugs, doing bodybuilding. He's Mr. Universe. He goes into the lockers one day and sees people shooting up drugs, steroids. Like this was the beginning of steroids. When I say this, people are like, oh no, Bob was on steroids too. Look, this is Bob's story.
Yeah.
Bob's story, what you can look up is he was Mr. Olympia when he quit. Not a lot of people are going to quit right when, guess what he was getting offered? The first protein shake deals. So there wasn't money in what he was doing. All of a sudden, there was money in bodybuilding. And guys were doing steroids, and he quit. When someone turns down money, I feel like there's a little, I believe what he's saying. And he wound up then getting into sort of like my passion of helping people enjoy life without breaking down. And he invented this device that he called a DARD, D-A-R-D. I think it was Dynamic Axial Resistance Device. Okay.
Rolls off the tongue.
It didn't catch on. By the time I was studying this, you couldn't even buy it anywhere. It didn't turn into a business that worked out. But it allowed you to do the opposite of a calf raise and strengthen the front shin muscles.
Oh, got it. Tibialis anterior.
Yeah. So one of the things I do that's really unusual, and Charles Poliquin did calf training, did tibialis training. Lots of coaches have done this. Bob was the creator and really had a big impact on me and in my workout style, which I hadn't seen anyone doing. I go from the resistance forward and backward, like with the sled, to then working my lower leg muscles. So with the sledding, you're pushing through your feet in various ways. I mean, you're working all kinds of stuff. But my mindset was like, okay, move the body forward and backward, then start addressing the body from the ground up. Let's get some extra build. Like before we even get into the knees, I found extra desensitization before getting into the knee work by doing the lower leg work after the sled work. Maybe it was just because the sled burns your legs and you get a little break. But we can't say it's a bad thing to have some extra ability in the front and back of our shins. And so an equipment company reached out, said like, is there anything, this is when the Knees Over Toes guy was starting to catch on social media. Like, is there anything that doesn't exist that you think should exist? I'm like, yeah, like there should be these DARD bars, but I told him call it a tib bar, like to make it simple for people because it's the anterior front tibialis. Tibia is your shin
Just
bone.
calling something a DARD also, I'm going to hell, but I mean, it's a hard one to sell.
Yeah.